All right, so today's lesson is over 7A, Introduction to Graphs of Quadratic Functions. In 7A, we will graph quadratic functions on the coordinate plane and use the graph to identify key attributes if possible, including x-intercept, y-intercept, zeros, maximum value, minimum values, vertex, and the equation of the axis of symmetry. So today we're going to talk about graphs of quadratic functions. Functions of the form f of x equals ax squared plus bx plus c are called quadratic. The graph of a quadratic function has the shape of a parabola. Now let's look at the parts of a quadratic function. All right, so first things first, see this where the line crosses the y-axis. Do y'all remember where that's called? The y-intercept. That is your y-intercept, where the graph crosses the y-axis. All right, where the graph crosses the x-axis. Do y'all remember what that's called? It is called the x-intercept. Now, there will be a couple words or meanings for this. I'm going to go ahead and write, we're not going to write x-intercept. Go ahead and write rocks, R-O-X-S. And what rocks means is roots, zeros, that's what the O represents in rocks, x-intercepts, and solutions. All four of those mean the same thing. So the one word we do know is x-intercept. So roots means the same as x-intercept. Zero means the same as x-intercept. Solution means the same as x-intercept. So if I ask what are the roots, I'm asking what is the x-intercept. If I'm asking what are the zeros, I'm asking for the x-intercepts. This bottom point down here, where the graph changes direction, that is called the vertex. The vertex will be the highest or lowest point depending on which way the graph is facing. The last thing that we're going to look at right here on the graph, this line that splits it down the middle evenly, that is called the axis of symmetry. If you'll notice, the axis of symmetry also goes through the vertex. So whenever we find out, eventually we're going to find out our vertex and say what point is the vertex located at, and you will say your axis of symmetry will always be the x value of the vertex. So down here we're going to go over some vocabulary: roots, zeros, x-intercept, solutions. Remember that's rocks. Okay, all four of those words mean the same thing. It's the location where the graph crosses the x-axis, or the points where the y-coordinate, or the points with a y-coordinate of 0. Next one, y-intercept, the location where the graph crosses the y-axis, or the point with the x-coordinate of 0. Next, the vertex. The vertex is the highest or lowest point. It is the turning point of the parabola. All right, axis of symmetry is the invisible line that passes through the vertex and separates the graph into two equal parts. So it separates into two equal halves. The equation is always x equals a number. Maximum or minimum value is the y-coordinate of the vertex. It represents the highest or lowest point in the parabola or graph. So if we're talking about our maximum point, we're talking about our highest point on the graph, whereas if we're talking about minimum point, we're talking about our lowest point on the graph. Looking at this first graph, we're going to find the x-intercept. So our x-intercept will be where it crosses the x-axis. Can anybody give me an x-intercept? -3. So we're going to put -3 comma 0. Can anybody give me another x-intercept? +1. So 1 comma 0 will be our x-intercepts. All right, so those 2 points are our x-intercepts. What about our zeros? Remember, we said zeros are the same as x-intercepts, right? So -3, -3, and 1 are my zeros. So we're not going to put them as, they're usually written as just numbers when they ask for the zeros. But when they ask for the x-intercepts, usually they'll be written as an ordered pair. Next, our y-intercept. Our y-intercept is where the graph crosses the y-axis. So where does that graph cross the y-axis at? At -3. So the ordered pair for that will be 0, -3. Make sure you're paying attention to where your 0 goes for your x-intercept and y-intercept. For x-intercept, your number will go in the x in the spot for the x, and then your 0 will go in for the y. For y-intercept, a 0 will go in for the x, and then a number will go in for the y. So the vertex is located at the turning point. So your vertex is located down here, at this turning point down here, and that will be at the ordered pair of -1, -4. So if you look at this graph, it actually has we ask ourselves, does it have a maximum or minimum value? It has a minimum value, which is the lowest point, okay? And that minimum value is at what number? What's the lowest it goes down to? -4 will be the minimum value. Y'all have talked about axis of symmetry before, or when you think of the word symmetry, it pretty much means it's split evenly. So our axis is a line of symmetry. So we're looking for the axis of symmetry, which splits it down the middle. So I'm gonna go ahead and draw the axis of symmetry, which would be right here. So that's my axis of symmetry, and it goes through what value on the x-axis? -1. It goes through -1. So it goes through the x-axis at -1. So it's x equals -1 would be my axis of symmetry. All right, go ahead and try the second one on your own. See if you can fill in each spot. Your x-intercept, where does it cross? Where does that graph cross or touch the x-axis at? At +2. So it will be 2, 0 would be my x-intercept. All right, so it only crosses or touches at one spot, right? So that's my only x-intercept. Now look at your 0. So what would my 0 be in this case? Just 2. It's also that same spot. Okay, what y'all get for the y-intercept? 0, -4. 0, -4 is my y-intercept. That's where it crosses the y-axis. Okay? All right, what are the coordinates of the vertex? It's 2, 0, right? That vertex is right up here. That's the turning point where it goes up and it turns and it starts going down. So that's my turning point. So it's 2, 0. Will this graph have a maximum or a minimum value? It has a maximum value because it has a highest point. And what's that maximum value at? Not remember, we're talking about how high or low it is, so we're looking at the y-axis.
0.
So it's at 0. So it's at pretty much where y equals 0, or just 0. Does everybody understand that? Okay. So pretty much your maximum or minimum value will always come from the vertex, because your vertex will either be your highest or lowest point, right? So it'll be whatever the y value of your vertex is. So notice up here, when we did this one here, our maximum value or our minimum value was -4. That's our vertex. That's the y value of the vertex. Okay? Same thing with axis of symmetry. The axis of symmetry is a line that splits it down the middle. What y'all get for the axis of symmetry? X equals 2. Make sure you write x equals 2 because it's actually a line. So notice that also comes from the vertex, because it crosses through the vertex. It crosses through the x-axis at 2. So notice up here again, for our vertex, our axis symmetry is -1. Notice our vertex is x equals -1. So you always get your vertex from that also. Any questions? This has a minimum value. We said it has a minimum. Since it has a minimum value, it looks like a U. It also has an axis symmetry of x equals 3. So that means it splits down the middle right here, where x equals 3. All right, so I know that's the middle, and it has exactly 1, 0. So it touches the x-axis only once. So I'm going to make a U. You should have a U shape. It looks like this here. Go ahead and look at this last problem. It says a quadratic function is graphed on the grid. Which of the statements are true? Choose 3 correct answers. So go ahead and choose 3 correct answers and see which ones are true, and then we'll go over it. So let's look at it. All right, the first one, the function has 1 positive and 1 negative 0. So first of all, what is a 0 again? 0 is the same as x-intercept. So let's see the x-intercepts. Here's a negative x-intercept at -1. Here's a positive x-intercept. So there's one of them. Everybody understand that? All right, the axis of symmetry is at y equals 1. Is that true or false? False. What's the axis of symmetry actually? X equals 1. Okay, x equals 1. Keep that in mind. Okay, x equals 1. Next, the minimum value of the function is 1. So the minimum value is 1. That means the lowest point will be at 1. But where's the lowest point going to be actually going down to? At -4. All right, so that was not true. The vertex of the graph is located at 1, -4. I go over to 1, down to -4. That is my vertex. So that one is true. The last one, the y-intercept is located at 0, -3. So where it crosses the y-axis is at 0, -3, which will be at that point right there. So that one is also true. So those are our three that are true.